In this video, we're going to do the second part of our Detective Pikachu. We're going to work on his fur. So if you haven't seen the last video, go and check it out. Or if you just want to do the fur part, I have a link to the files in the description, so you can get the first file. So first of all, I did actually make a few adjustments between the end of the last video and here. I wanted to try to tweak his exact shaping to be a little more proportionate to the movie model. So a few things, I kind of squared off his head a little, try to match the exact shape here a little more. As you can see there, I think I made him a little wider. I made the ears a little bit shorter and rounded the tips off since they look more round compared to the more pointy shape of the cartoon version. I think I also moved the mouth just a little bit up as well. So in this video, we're going to work on his fur. Before we work on the fur, we should start by setting up for Cycles rendering. Oh, we need to change our render engine to Cycles. We're gonna change the light paths. I found that usually I might use like 2 for preview rendering, which isn't enough for it to look great, but it's good enough to get a good idea. However, I found with the fur in my test runs that I needed more for it to look okay for preview purposes, and even more for it to look good for final render purposes. And now if I hit render, we could see that likely want to have a plane placed on the end, on the bottom, so that you can have something to bounce maybe some light off of. Maybe just extrude these, scale, and maybe add like subdivision surface, just so that we have some nice round thing for it to bounce some light off of. Then we need a lamp. We have one. Now that we got the lamp, we should go to the settings, and maybe I'll change it to sun. And rotate it around. We'll use that for now. We might want to use a different setup, like maybe a 3-point with, well, this looks like it has maybe a 3-point with some like red, some bluish on the side and red on this other side. So we might want lighting kind of like that, but we'll use the sunlight for now. Now make sure to save a whole lot when doing this, because you're probably going to crash multiple times, at least with the beta version, or if you go too heavy on the fur. Alright, so I think first of all we are going to have to break the symmetry, so we're going to go to the modifiers. Maybe I'll shift D and duplicate this body so that I can still have it later, in case maybe I need to fix something. So I'm just going to apply it, and then I can go ahead and maybe rotate, hide my other one. Link select this, maybe rotate it a little. Rotate Z. And maybe I want to rotate this a little. Z as well. G. And maybe I might want to make this one at a higher angle like they have in the other pictures. Make it a little nicer, and GY. Make it less symmetrical, make it look more realistic in that way, and save. And now we gotta add the fur. So to do that, we first need to decide on where to add the fur with a vertex group. So I'll call this fur, and I can tab into edit mode, select all, and I can assign the fur with a weight of 1. However, there's going to be some areas where I don't want it. For example, I don't want any fur in the mouth. That would be kind of gross. So let's just try to select the mouth area. And just prevent fur. Now, sadly, I don't think I can give it different weights. I think it has to either be 0 or 1, because some areas of animals tend to have more fur than others. So that would have been nice if I could have. Oops. So, and then I'll just select this. Bottom of the foot. Don't think there'd be any here. Oops. Select. Inside the eyes. Inside the eye sockets, I don't want any of those to have fur. I could maybe hide this and choose not to have fur where the hat is. Okay, so the hat will hide where we need the fur. Or maybe you don't want that. I don't know. And, well, hopefully I got all the spots that shouldn't have fur. I probably forgot something, but that'll be good for now. I'll turn the weight down to 0, and I will assign. So now if I go to weight paint, actually, I think the top of the head could probably just keep it. Go back to object mode, tab into edit mode. I'm going to hide the hat again. And I'm going to assign it to 1 because it didn't look like that would be good. Alright, so that should cover it for the most part. Where the red areas are where we want fur, and the other colors are where we don't. Now I can go and show the hat again. Save. And now to add the fur, you're going to go to particles, which is this little guy that kind of looks like an arrow pointing to the top left. And what a particle system is it's a system that allows you to easily render thousands of the same thing. So there's 2 different types. There's emitters, which are things like maybe like rain droplets, where you have like individual drops of rain all falling down, and then when it, after a time limit, or maybe when it hits the ground, it will say to disable that drop, and then it'll move it back to the top to start it again. Or maybe you could do it for like individual puffs of smoke in smoke coming out of like a campfire or something, and then after it gets to the top, it'll slowly fade to invisible, and then disable, and then it can be recycled and put on the bottom and then go up. But there's also a hair type of particle system where you can just place it all around your mesh, and you could either use things that aren't hairs, or you could use like little curved things to be your hair. So we're going to add a particle system and save, and you can see by default, it has the emitter. So this kind of looks like little drops of like snow or something are coming out of our Pikachu. But we're going to change it to hair and then stop playing. Now this hair is obviously way too long. So the first thing we'll do is go to hair length and just shrink it quite a bit. Now his hair doesn't look too long in the movie, so we'll try to keep it fairly short. I might go for 0.05 for this. Now I'm going to set the number to 5,000. Now obviously Pikachu has more hair than 5,000. However, we're not going to put all the hair on him just yet. This is going to be control hairs that we can use to comb him. And then we'll set it up to put hairs around these. So you can kind of think of it as like when you use a subdivision surface, you have the control mesh where you have less polys, then you have a subdivision applied over it where it adds more polys and makes it smoother based off of your control mesh. So these are just the control hairs. Alright, so now under vertex groups, since we have it in like our mouth and stuff, we want to go to density and set it to fur. And now it shouldn't have it in our mouth or inside our eyeballs or at like the bottom of our feet or anywhere else where we decided that we didn't want hair. And we can hit save. So to add more, I can use children and set to interpolated, and it'll add more for me. Maybe I might want like 50 more. Maybe like 20 more for now. But I'm going to set that back to none so that I can work quickly. So I think the first thing we'll do is we'll try to comb him. So we can actually go from object mode into a new particle edit mode, and it has a little comb to the side of it. And what this does is it allows us to comb and do other grooming things such as cutting or adding more hair or smoothing it out, each of our control hairs. So we can use our comb and say that we want the hair on his ears to go in that direction maybe. And we can just choose the directions based off where we want it, where we think it should go, or based off of where it looks like it's going in the pictures. Now, if you want it to be a little less strong, you can go and right click up here, header, show tool settings, and then you can turn the strength down more. And it'll leave some of the hairs a little less smooth when you comb it. So we can then just bring it down where we think they all should go. And of course we can bring the radius up so that we can affect more of them at the same time. And as you can see with his tail, it looks like it goes more up in that direction and down on the bottom. So we can try to do that a little. And we can always comb stuff to not be perfectly smooth with him so that maybe it comes out a little. Make him floofier. We also got smooth, which will smooth out the lines so they're more straight. You got add, so if you have like a bald spot, you can add some more. You got length, which can adjust the length, so I think the belly looks like his hairs are longer than, say, his face, so you could adjust the length. You got puff, which kind of puffs him out. We got cut, which just is the opposite of add, and it just deletes the hairs. So maybe I want to puff out some hairs. Maybe turn the strength up a little higher. All right, we'll save. And then maybe we could go back into object mode and render it. And you can see we have, a few hairs on him. So we might want to add more hairs. So we can do that with turning on the interpolated ones. And it'll update with more hairs added to him. Again, make sure to save often. So now maybe we should go ahead and work on the shader for the hair. So now I'll go into the shading side of things. And on our Pikachu, we're going to go to the materials tab. And we're going to add another material, which will be a duplicate of the body at first. So we'll just hit the 3 here to duplicate it and make it its own version. And we'll call it fur. And then we'll go into the shader settings. And then we'll go into the particle tab. And under render, we can change the body material to the fur material. We also got the render as path, which makes it hair. You could also make it objects. So if you wanted him to have trees coming out of him or something, you could do that. That's useful for making like a forest, but just examples of what you can use this stuff for. Now, we got some shading tools. So first of all, we're not going to use the principled BSDF for this. And I can go into the rendered view. And as you can see, the body is a different color than the hair. So save a lot. Now you're going to need to use the texture so you can keep it the same color as it's supposed to be. But now we're going to start by pressing Shift A, search, and search for hair. You're going to need a hair info, which gives us information about our strands of hair. You're going to need a hair BSDF. Now there's 2 different modes. You got reflection and transmission, and we're going to want to combine the 2 because I think it looks best with both. So under reflection, okay, so we're going to start with a diffuse, and we will then add a mix to mix the diffuse and the reflection. And I'll make sure to change this one to transmission for later. And I can go and drag the color into the color of the diffuse and drag the mix into the surface. And now we can see his hair is colored. Now we're going to lower the reflection so that he doesn't look quite so shiny and white and stuff. Maybe down there or so. And then we can go and Shift A, add shader. And we're going to add our hair BSDF. And this will try to help make it look a little shinier. Maybe turn down the reflection, turn on the mix shader for the diffuse a little bit more even. Save again. We can try and make it look a little softer by having his furs go and fading their opacity as it gets farther away. So I'll select him again. And I can use this intercept. Now what the intercept is it basically says black when it's touching the body, and it gets whiter as it gets away from the body. So if I showed you that, you can see that it's black at the bottom of the hair and white as it gets farther away. So I crashed again. So again, make sure to save often or else you'll crash and lose everything. So I'm going to try to fade the transparency off. So I'm going to search for a color ramp and plug the intercept into that. Save, Shift, select A, find a mix shader, adding there, save, Shift A, search for a transparent BSDF, and I'm going to go into there. And now it's going to be more transparent. And I'm going to base it off of the intercept so that it gets more transparent as it goes away. I'm going to move this black over to the side more so that more of it's visible. But I think I might change it to more of a darker gray to make it a little less visible. And I'll save. So now it looks pretty good. I think the shader in the movie looks a lot better, or maybe it's more of the lighting. So I'm curious if you guys have any ideas how to make this look more fluffy. This is kind of based off of the one that's in Blender Guru's fur video where he made a fur ball. Now, one thing that might be partly it is that our Pikachu doesn't have anywhere near the amount of fur he should have. So what we have here, if I go to this, we started with 5,000. And then with our children, we added 20. Now 5,000 times 20 makes 100,000. Now that's about how many hairs there are on a human head. But humans don't really have that much hair compared to a lot of other animals. For instance, on a human head, we have about 1,000 hairs per square inch. But say a dog has about 15,000 per square inch. And compared to a lot of other animals that you'll think of, that's not even that much. For instance, cats have 60,000 per square inch on their back. And even more, 120,000 on average on their front with a belly area. And others even have 1,000,000 per square inch on average. I couldn't find much as far as like what any rodents have. Maybe if I searched for a bunny, I might have found something. But I'm going to assume that it likely has a lot more. I did see that the Zootopia, which had a bunny and a fox as the main character, they said that both of the main characters had somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 3 million furs on their heads. So to give you a reference, we only have 100,000 here on his whole body. So if we added more, it might look a little better. But there's a high chance that we might crash. Next up, I'm going to just go and disable the children so that we can do a little bit more fine tweaking on his fur. So now I can go back to the layout tab and I can go into particle edit and fine tweak the fur a little. So one thing I noticed is that his fur looks like it may be going out a little bit more around here. I think I could maybe add Maybe go and turn on interpolate so it bases it off of what's around. And I might turn the count down to 1. And I might just try to add a few more hairs here to get some more control on the face. And maybe I will cut a few of these lower ones so that they don't get into the mouth area too much. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and comb them outwards. I think maybe having them pointing away from each other where like the area between his mouth and nose kind of splits might make it look a little better. Kind of like a mustache actually. And I might want to try to floof him out some more here with the puff. And it's nice to use a drawing tablet for this stuff. Now I think also it might be a good idea to go to the length tool, turn the strength up, and maybe grow some of the hair on the sides and on his belly some more. Since that's supposed to be on the longer side. And the belly. Actually, I think I might have went a little too far, so maybe I'll turn it down just a tad bit. And if we base off of, say, the cat, where it has a lot more fur on its belly, maybe we should add a little bit more. So we go to the add. And then maybe I can turn the count up a little higher, maybe 4. And just add a few more furs on his belly area. And maybe that will make him look a little better. And maybe we want to go ahead and make his tail hair longer. It looks a little longer in that picture. I have it to shrink. Should have it to grow if I want to get longer. Save. That's gone a little too long in some of these areas, so I'll just shrink. And maybe I'll go and puff up some areas like his belly area. And maybe I'll save it again. And you can really improve it a lot by just working a lot on it. Maybe I'll go back to the cut tool and cut some of this right near his eye, where I don't want any hair getting his eye. So, and maybe I'll save, and maybe I will call that quits. Control tab and go into object mode. Hit save. Turn the interpolated. Turn on render. And we got Detective Pikachu. Now we can also add a little bit more control with our interpolated ones. We got some clumping, where it tries to clump hairs together more, since a lot of the time hair will come together. Stay in its own groups or clumps, so I might turn that up a little bit. And there's roughness, for example, which we can make the hair a little bit more rough. Actually, the clumping went up way high. Let's turn that to like 0.1 maybe. Yeah, that's better. Should be clumped a little bit, but not too much. You can add some roughness to it. a lot. So this basically applies a roughness texture around him that Blender has by default, or a noise texture, and it will make his hair a lot noisier. Now obviously 1 is way too much. The size also adjusts like how many times the texture will like tile and stuff, so that you can make it fine-tuned. So you might want like 0.02 or something on this, so that it's not too much for the uniform. And then maybe you might want, say, on the end point, which is where it will fluff up only and get roughed up only towards the end. Maybe you might want it to be a little higher, so maybe like 0.1. Maybe that might be good. We'll see. And you can see like some of his hairs are just kind of flying out a little bit. That actually seems like a lot, so maybe I'll turn that down to more like 0.05. Don't want it to be too much. You want to have a lot of the smoothness. And maybe even lower. So let's do like 0.02 again. 0.02 again. And there's also a random rough, so maybe you might want a little tiny bit of that, 0.01 for example. And that'll just make it the interpolation of the hairs, children hair surrounding it, not quite as smooth, and make it look a little bit more like an actual animal. Let's save, and hopefully it doesn't crash while we save. So you can see we got some roughness going along the edges. We got some endpoint ones where they're fluffing out. And if you can get away with rendering even more hairs on your model, it might look better. I would say that probably his face might need to have the hairs shrunk even more. So I'll save, go to the settings, turn off the interpolated real quick, and then I'll go back into particle edit. And with the length, we could go on shrink and just do a quick shrink pass on his face hair, his facial hair, so that it's a little shorter. We'll go back into object mode, save, interpolated. Maybe it'll look a little better here, hopefully. Can maybe also, in the kink, it has a kink type, so maybe you want to have a bit of a curl in his hair. And now he looks a little crazy, so we'll keep it at nothing. So with the fur, there's just a lot of fine tuning you have to do to get it to look right. Save again. For performance reasons, I'm gonna just quickly disable the fur particle system, and then we might go ahead and just apply these, and maybe we might go into sculpting and try and make it look less perfect. So I might go to sculpting. I might just use the grab brush and try to, first of all, we shouldn't have any symmetry. We want to make this look just a little less perfect, since it's a hat, it's not going to be perfect. Maybe you get the point. Just make it a little less perfect looking, and that might make it look a little better. And then go back and enable this, save, do a render, maybe get rid of all your Pikachu's references. So I went and worked on it some more. I raised the hairs to 500, and I in the hair shape, I made the radius scale, I believe 0.002, which is a lot finer and smaller. I find that with the shorter hair, like especially in the front of his face, that it looks best when you have a lot of thinner, finer ones. You can kind of get away with thicker ones with less if you have longer fur everywhere, because then it just kind of looks like a few pieces of fur that's clumped together. But it looks kind of patchy when it's in very short spots, so it didn't work well. I set the length in the interpolated to 0.3, which means that it's only 30% of the length. However, there's a threshold of 0.03, which means that 3% of my hairs are full length. So I get some that come off the side and others that largely don't make much difference to the silhouette. So you might want a little bit less, a little bit more. You'll see based off your testing. I increased the clumping a little bit. I believe the roughness is about the same. In the fur shader, I went and I lowered the opacity with this light gray to make it look a little softer, and I used a math add node to add 0.02 into the color of the hair transmission. This was because it was at completely white before, which kind of made it look a little washed out, especially like on the black tips of the ears, where it looked kind of more of a gray than a black. So I kept that, and I can still have like a little bit of it getting brighter towards the tips here, where it looks almost white at the edges of the hair, but not so that the tips look gray. On the other shader for the main body, I also threw a hue saturation value node in to slightly adjust it to try and make it look a little closer to the same color that the shaded fur would look. Lastly, I went and I smoothed out the fur after combing it, where I tried to match the directions more, so I got a flow going like this, which is so up around the eyes, it goes up, then it goes out towards the side of the head, and then lowers, and then here it goes like that, and again like that. Try and match it up with the reference pics. And then I use a smooth brush and a little bit of the puff brush to try to smooth the shading and puff it out a little bit. And finally, I went and I sculpted the hat a little bit more to make it look a little rougher. So this was MrTriPie. If you liked this video, please comment, like, and subscribe to help my channel grow. Thank you. If you got any ideas on how to make the fur look a little bit nicer, that's also very helpful, and I'm sure other people will agree. Thank you for watching.